Do you have a cute charm pack sitting around and you don't know what you're going to do with it? How about if we make a table runner? The very first thing we're going to do is look at all those pieces in that charm pack that came with it, and you're going to need 36 of them. Usually there's 42 in a package. Mine had 42, and so that means I need to get rid of 6 of the squares, and so I just picked ones that I didn't like. I didn't especially like these, and there were 6 of these, so I'm going to take those away. The next thing we're going to do is lay out 4 9 patches. As you can see, I've separated out the charm squares into big patterns and littler patterns, and then things that are going to be sort of shocking, and there's a reason for that. These 4 squares have very strong patterns, so I'm going to use these 4 squares in a method that they're going to be cut up into the smallest pieces, so they're going to form the center of my 9 patches. This next group has pieces that have really big prints on them, and I'm going to put those in the 4 corners of my 9 patches. And then the ones that are sort of medium are going to go in here in the in-betweens. So I have arranged all the squares into 4 9 patches, and I will sew those together. Although for this pattern you could just randomly sew the squares into the 9 patches, I do like what happens later when you put the big patterns in the edges and the more prominent patterns in the center. And so therefore I'm doing 1 block at a time. I just put it on my cutting mat and brought it over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew the rows together first, like that. After you sew the rows together over each block, you want to press the top and the bottom, these seams, in one direction. So I press these seams here. The seam allowance is pressed that way, towards that way. But on the middle one, the seam allowances are pressed on the opposite direction. Pressing the seams in opposite directions is what makes it easier to make your points match like this. That's because you can do something called nesting your seams if your seam allowances are pointing in different directions. When I match up these 2 seams like this, the seam here is perfectly flat because these are nested in to each other like that. And you can feel that. You can feel whether they're flat or not. And I am a pinner, so I just stick 1 pin in here to hold it while I'm futzing around before I sew. And then just press. I think it helps to press like this to set the seam first, and then open it up and press again. And now we just have to do that 3 more times to create 3 more 9 patches. And now I have 4 9 patches. Okay, the next part is why this is called a disappearing 9 patch pattern. It's because we're going to actually make the 9 patch disappear. And we're going to do that by cutting the block in half both ways. We're going to cut it this way and this way. Now, if you have absolutely perfect piecing, then this block in the center will measure 4.5 inches. And then so cutting it in half would be at 2.25 inches. The most important thing though is to measure your actual block and then cut it in half according to your actual block measurements. When you're cutting it in half, do line up that amount that you're going to cut. So mine is actually at 2.25. I'm lining it up with the seam line here. And then just do your cut. And before you actually touch the block at all, I would just turn it like this and do the same process again. Measure to see how big that block in the middle is. And then line up the measurement that's half of that with the seam line here. And then do a cut down the middle. Then you should have 4 new blocks, just like that. You'll need to repeat that with each of the 4 9-patch blocks you made. When you have your 16 blocks, it's time to have some fun laying them out. Because we've made 16 squares, we can lay them out in a few different ways. We can decide how we want to lay them out depending on how we want to use our table runner. So we can make just a plain old table runner, which would be 8 squares by 2 squares. You could make a table topper, which would be a nice square, it'd be 4 by 4 squares. And then if you wanted something a slightly different size, you could do 5 by 3 squares, and then have an extra one that's a pot holder or a mug rug or something. So you get to pick which way you are going to lay out your table runner. I'm going to lay mine out with the 8 by 2 because of where I'm planning to put it for the holiday. But I did want to actually point out that these are the blocks, remember the stripes that were in the middle. So because they're smaller now, they were cut in smaller pieces, they don't take over as much. These blocks that were on the 4 corners of the 9-patch have they're big prints, and so the whole print is preserved in the final block that we made. I think I've decided on this layout as my final layout, and one tip I will give you is to take a picture of your final layout so that when you're taking things back and forth to the sewing machine, if things get a little messed up, you'll be able to remember exactly how you had it arranged. And once you've gotten all the pieces sewn together, you will have a table runner ready, and you'll notice that it's still a top. It's not turned into a quilt yet. Most quilting patterns you buy don't go beyond teaching you how to make the top like this. They don't teach you how to do the quilting and binding. I have 2 options for you in order to fix that for you so that you can make this into a whole quilted table runner. First, there will be, or already is, depending on when you watch this video, a series here from me on YouTube called Layer, Quilt, and Bind. It'll be a series of videos all about how to turn a quilt top into a quilt. If you're a very hesitant quilter and you're just starting out, I do have a course that's available, and that's linked down below, that teaches you how to do everything from buying the fabric all the way down to binding your first quilt. So if you're a new sewer, you just got your sewing machine and you know how to sew a seam, this course will help you make your first quilt and be able to help you the next time you make a pattern quilt, how to turn it into a finished quilt. You'd be all set to do that. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.